as the denominator gets smaller here, what does this number become? Smaller, bigger, or stay the same? The overall number. Let's think about like if we have 5. What if you have 5 divided by 0.001? Is that a large number or a small number? That's a big number, right? You're taking 5 and you're breaking it up into very small pieces. You get lots of, and then if you look at 5 divided by an even smaller number, what happens? It gets even bigger. So in terms of these symbolic rules that we're going to look at, if we have a positive divided by something that's 0 but positive, is this a positive number also? Yeah, so let's call that positive infinity. You see that pattern, that trend? Now, what if we have the opposite? We have -2 divided by something that's really, really close to 0. That's a very negative number, very negative, right? It's large in magnitude, but it's very, very negative. Yeah, so if we have minus over 0 plus, that's the pattern that's happening here. We still have 0 plus a little bit in the bottom. Now we have a negative number on top. So what would that be? Negative infinity. Sorry, I wrote 0 minus, but we have plus divided by 0 plus would be positive infinity. We have minus divided by 0 plus would be negative infinity. And now you proposed a new pattern or new rule that we could look at. What was it?
Infinity divided by the negative close to 0. Infinity negative divided by negative.
A negative divided by a negative close to 0, and you're saying that would be positive infinity?
Yeah.
Okay. There's one more case. There's one more case, which is what if we look at a positive divided by a 0 minus, a negative number that's small in magnitude. Would this be positive or negative infinity? Negative infinity. It's all about whether or not the signs agree. In the two cases where the signs agree, you get positive, and in the two cases where they disagree, you get negative, just like if you're dividing regular numbers. So let's look at how we can go back and do the problem we just did without needing to touch the computer at all, but using these patterns. And I don't want you to just try to memorize these without understanding. I think that the limit as x approaches 0 plus of 5 plus x over 6x. Rewrite this using properties of limits as the limit as x approaches 0 plus of 5 plus x over the limit as x approaches 0 plus of 6x. Well, can I plug in 0 plus? And here's the part. I can plug in 0 plus even though I can't plug in 0. Because 0 plus isn't a real number. 0 plus is just a thing I made up to help me walk through this. So the key insight here is that there's a concept. So I have 5 plus 0 plus over 6 times 0 plus. Now 5 plus 0 plus, if I had to track it into one of the 4 symbols we just did, what would you call that? Plus, minus, 0 plus, or 0 minus? I would call that plus, absolutely, because that's just a positive number that's not close at all to 0. Then, what about this 6 times 0 plus? If I take something really, really, really small that's positive and I multiply it by a positive number, it's still really small and it's still positive. So this is a positive thing times a very small positive. And it might get a little bit bigger, but it's still small. So would this be plus 0 minus or minus? This would be 0 plus. And then I can recognize that this pattern corresponds to positive infinity. So I don't need the numeric. And in fact, the numerics are kind of a distraction. And then if I look at the limit as x approaches 0 minus of 5 plus x over 6x, I can say, okay, that's 5 plus 0 minus over 6 times 0 minus. Now, if I have 5 and I add just a tiny negative number to it, what's the result there? Yes, so this would be plus over 0 minus. Y'all see why we got that? Okay, so, and what's that going to be? Negative infinity. Isn't that amazing that we don't need the table? We don't have to do 15 calculations. We can reason through it the same way we can reason through other calculations. And then what makes this happen is learning to think about numbers not as singular value in classes, as trends. And that's really the point of this limit idea, is instead of thinking about a number as a single thing that you calculate once, you think about it as a progression of what is the trend of these values. And then you replace that, instead of thinking about like -5 and -7 as different numbers, you just think about both of them as negative numbers that are not close to 0. And once you do that, it's like you have an app installed in your brain that makes all these problems so much